Greeting, friends, and welcome to the Continuing Church of God's Behind the Word video for 2022. To start with, we need to ask the question of just what work is being done and who is it that is behind the work. Well, we are talking about the work of God, and of course, it is ultimately God that is behind that work. But today I want to focus on a couple of aspects of God's work. The two aspects I want to look at closer today are proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom of God, as stated in Matthew 24:14, and the fulfillment of the mystery spoken of in Romans 11:25. Proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom of God, as stated in Matthew 24:14, is something that will be done right up until a few days before the beginning of the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation is the end spoken of in Matthew 24:14. Matthew 24:14 does not state who will be doing the proclaiming of the gospel, just that it will be done. After the crucifixion of the Messiah, it was Peter that began the work of proclaiming the gospel on Pentecost, a tad bit over 1,991 years ago. We can read about that beginning in Acts 2, verse 14. As far as fulfilling the mystery spoken of in Romans 11, verse 25, the calling of the full number of Gentiles into the body of Christ, this too was started by Peter beginning in Acts 10, verse 24, when God revealed to him that the Gentiles were to be included in his plan of salvation, beginning with Cornelius and his household. It can reasonably be assumed that as long as the gospel is being proclaimed, which will continue until within a few days of the beginning of the Great Tribulation, that God will use that proclamation to continue to call Gentiles into his family. Therefore, both of these works will continue together and will end very close to the same time. And since the Great Tribulation has not yet begun, both these works must continue to be done. But done by whom? God is able to raise up these stones to complete the work of proclaiming the gospel as a witness and calling Gentiles into his family. However, there are two problems with these stones. The first problem is that they are not made in the image and likeness of the Almighty God. The second problem is that these stones cannot say, "No, I won't do it. I have other things to do." If God raised up these stones to complete the work, they must obey. But that is not what God wants. God wants his children, like Peter, to complete the work. Unlike these stones, we have the God-given right and the God-given ability to say no. Every single person you're about to meet said, "Yes, I'll do it. Here I am. Call on me." Here is their story. So, for our first look behind the works, let's go down to Kenya, Africa, and visit Evangelist Ocheng.
Before I joined the church, I knew Dr. Bob when we were with him in Living Church of God. But we started working in 2013 when I joined the Church of God, and from then I've been working for the church for all those years. And now I'm overseeing all churches in Africa. And in Africa, right now, when I joined the church, I was just alone with 26 people. But right now, the church has got over 4,000 people in Africa. Let me say in Kenya. In Kenya, we have more than 4,000 people. And in Malawi, we are having over 3,000 people. So the church is still continuing growing. And as per now, like now, I'm in Malawi doing the same work. And from Malawi, I'll go to Mozambique. In Mozambique, we have, let me say, 6 congregations with almost 300 people. So the church is doing well. And let me say that since we joined the church, have seen the hand of God, because the work here is being driven by the Almighty Himself. The doors are open for the church because the way it is growing, it is not of my strength, but the strength from God Himself. Let me say, in Kenya, now we have 22 congregations, and in Malawi, we have almost 13 congregations, and in Mozambique, we have 6 congregations. Not only that, we have congregations in Ethiopia, we have congregations in Ghana. So the church, since we joined the church, the Continuing Church of God, God has been working miraculously, because the church is growing highly.
Yes. Did I understand you correctly, Evans, to say that there were 3,000 in Malawi?
Yes.
Okay. I did not know we had that many.
Yeah, we have many people in Malawi.
Okay. Now, Evans, you have something going with the youth program also. Is that correct?
Sorry?
A youth program in Africa.
We have youth program. In the church, we have youth program, which has been going on, and it is really, it made the church to grow rapidly. Because since we started youth camp, we have seen a total discipline in the church, and the youth are growing very well, and the church is going very well. It does a lot of things in the church. So we have youth program in the church. We are doing Feast of Tabernacles and other feasts every year. So things are just going well.
Right, I can understand that. I know that you're very, very busy. How many countries in Africa do we have congregations in, Evans?
In Africa, we have so many congregations, because in Ethiopia, we have one congregation. In Ethiopia, we have many congregations in Ghana, even though right now, Ghana, when we started, we had 5 congregations, but they are still increasing in Ghana. And now I've taken a long time before I go to Ghana. So right now, I have not contacted Samuel recently. So I don't know how far it has gone. But recently, I will go to Ghana to confirm what's going on there. But in Uganda, we have a family. We don't have it is just a congregation, because it is just a family. We have a family in Uganda. We don't have so many people in Uganda. In Tanzania, we have 2 congregations in Tanzania. I think that's how we are growing in Kenya.
Okay.
In Africa.
How do people contact you in Africa, Evans?
Yeah, we have been. I've been getting so many different contacts, because some are coming to the church through the website. People are visiting the CCOG website, and from there, I'm receiving so many letters from them. Other people are contacting me through our books, through the books. Some people are just contacting me because we are preaching the gospel.
Okay. So are they contacting you personally, Evans?
Yeah, there are some people who are contacting me personally.
Oh, okay.
And some are contacting Dr. Bob, and through Dr. Bob, I'm getting them.
Okay, so they contact him, and then he refers them to you.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, Evans, I want to just say things for our viewers here, that you are an evangelist. I've been calling you Evans as opposed to evangelist Ocheng, because we are good friends. But I wanted people to know that you're the evangelist that we have in the Continuing Church of God, and the evangelist to Africa. Is there anything that you would like to say in closing, Evans?
Yes, I have a lot to say, because, since we started, Dr. Bob has been working seriously. Let me say, he has really worked very hard, because right now we are printing books. We are printing books in Africa, in Kenya. And in Malawi, we want to start printing books. And Dr. Bob has been supporting the church highly. So I'm really appreciating the kind of work he's doing. And he's working tirelessly in order to print books and a weekly update. We are receiving a weekly update every week. He has done a lot of. He is really working very hard so that to make the church to grow.
I would totally agree with you, Evans. He is doing a yeoman's work, and so are you. And I want to say, Evans, that all of us are very appreciative of the work that not only Dr. Thiel is doing, but that you are doing, and all our brethren in Africa. I know there's a tremendous amount of work to do there. That the Lord is bringing in all the Gentiles. The harvest is ripe, and we thank you very much for what you've done for us, Evans.
We are really thank Dr. Bob so much, because Dr. Bob is doing so many things. Even the orphans, is helping the orphans in Africa. He is helping the widows in Africa. Those who are having hunger. He's really doing a lot of things.
Right. Well, Evans, I know that you're very, very busy, and I'm going to let you go, but I do want to add this, that I know Rose was going to be with you, your wife, and I dearly wanted to meet her too. And I had a little problems with my computer, which prevented that. But I do want to say to you that we all appreciate Rose in the work that she's doing to support you also. And I think that that's important to say.
She has been helping me so much. Rose has been helping me so much because, first of all, Rose is a volunteer lady. She has been doing a lot of things to make the church grow. And she has been helping me so much, and she has given me a free time so that I can move and preach the gospel without any problem. So Rose is really helping me.
Yes, and we thank her too. Evans, I know you're very busy, and I'm going to let you go now. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much, brother.
Goodbye.
Be blessed and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Now let's go to the country of Malawi, Africa, and visit Radson Maloa, who is a pastor in the Continuing Church of God, and talk to him and find out what God has him doing behind the work.
Thank you so much for joining us. Please, sir, tell us what you're doing for the Continuing Church of God behind the work.
Yes, I'm the pastor of Continuing Church of God, and I'm looking both Malawi and Mozambique. We are having almost 3,000 brethren in both Malawi and Mozambique. We are having brethren in Mozambique, 3,000 in Malawi.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, and you're the pastor for Malawi and Mozambique?
Yes, I'm looking after Mozambique and Malawi, but especially I'm staying in Malawi.
Okay.
We have six congregations in Mozambique.
Okay. And
yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, and in Malawi, we are having 13 of them.
15 congregations. And how are they? Yeah. How are people contacting you, Rodson?
Hello. Yes, yes, I do visit people and preach the gospel.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm doing the translation of the magazine in Continuing Church of God. So when I'm distributing to the people, when they read them, they come across of looking to know what is there in the Church of God.
Okay.
Even on the website.
Okay. So
our website is most of the people.
Are you doing interpreting too? Did I understand you correct?
Hello?
Yes. Are you interpreting, Radson? Or no?
Yes.
Okay.
I do translate the magazine and some of the books in the Continuing Church of.
Okay. All right. So you translate some of the books from English.
Yes, in our language, Chichewa.
Okay. I can't pronounce that very well. Chichewa? Is that what your language is?
Yeah, Chichewa language.
Chichewa. Okay. So you translate from English into Chichewa.
Yes.
Excellent. Radson, I know it's late out there in Malawi, and I know you guys want to go to bed, and I am
very appreciative that you took the time to come on over and talk with us. This is a special bonus round for the viewers for Behind the Work. So thank you very much for joining us and giving us an update. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, first of all, just to thank the Continuing Church of God for providing the materials and the literature so that it can assist the work here in Malawi. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Radson.
Thank you.
Now we're going to come back to Africa in a bit, but first of all, let's go up to the United States and visit the host of the American feast site, Lou and Pat Rubin.
Lou, tell us right now, what does God have you doing for the work?
So I do a sermonette here and there, maybe a sermon when I'm asked to, and I have I was the Feast Tabernacles coordinator last year, and I'm supposed to still be doing that. I was asked by Dr. Teal to if I would do it, and so I said yes, and so that's, basically, I guess I could say that's what I do.
Okay. So when you're hosting a feast site, what you're basically doing is you're organizing it. Is that what you're saying? You organize the feast site?
Right.
Right. Okay, so you get people assigned or volunteering to perform, do first sermonettes, that sort of thing?
Lead songs and whatever things may be coming up, during that period of time. Take up the offering and take up collection and things like that.
Now, to continue our look behind the work, let's go to the Pacific Ocean, to the island of the Philippines, and visit the host of the Philippine Feast of Tabernacles, Joe Lumpe.
What I know God has called you into the CCOG. He has a specific purpose for it, calling us all. What does God have you doing behind the work right now in the CCOG?
Actually, I'm hosting several festivals already, like the Feast of Tabernacles, in different places where God is putting His name there. Yeah, and I have been baptizing 4 persons just recently in the last year's Feast of Tabernacles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that the first time you baptized anyone, Joe?
Yes. That was the first time. I'm happy for that opportunity.
Yes, indeed. That's truly a blessing for the church. Was in your baptismal there, in your first time, was it somewhat nerve-wracking for you to do that?
Yes, of course, because that's the first time, and I know that for me that was the best thing that I've ever done in the church and in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. That's got to be an exciting time in your life. Yes, indeed. I can understand that.
Although some quite, yes, of course, nervous.
Yes.
Now, while we're in the Pacific, let's go over to the island of New Zealand and visit Shirley Jestro, who has put together a Bible News Prophecy radio program.
You.
Good to see you too.
Okay, you're talking to us from the beautiful country of New Zealand. Shirley, tell us, when did you first come into the Continuing Church of God?
I first came into the Continuing Church of God, I think it was the end of 2012 or the beginning of 2013.
Okay, so you've been in here just about as long as Dr. Teal has.
I think so.
Okay. Shirley, God has called you into the Continuing Church of God, called you to do His work behind the work.
what does God have you doing now behind the work?
Okay, so currently I'm looking after the Bible News Prophecy online radio channel, and that involves, it's just not me doing it. There's a lot of our brethren also working, volunteering in that department with news reports and sermons and sermonettes and things like that.
Okay. Now, when you talk about the radio program, how many listeners do we have on that station?
Okay, so it does range. I haven't actually checked the stats, but it's about in the thousands.
Okay. How could people listen to that if they wanted to dial into that station? What would be the how would they be able to listen to it?
And just click on the listen link, and they can listen to it there. Or they could also go on the TuneIn app and search for Bible News Prophecy.
Okay. Now you've been doing quite a bit of work, I know, on the Bible lessons, study the Bible lessons, the revised version for the Continuing Church of God. How did you get involved in that?
Well, it was a project Dr. Teal asked me to assist on it, and so I agreed to it, and I think it was 2014. And so what I do on it is I just research a lot of the subjects that's involved with the Bible study course, and then I just check the information and make any suggestions.
So right now, what lesson are you on, Shirley?
I believe it's lesson 21.
Lesson 21. How many of them are there?
50 lessons.
How many?
50.
Oh wow! So you're not quite halfway through the work
No,
then.
I'm quite yet.
Okay.
I'd like to add that there are other work that I have to do, like the accounting, the annual charities report, as well as the flipboard. We do as e-magazine with CCOG write news articles, and there's also social media that I have to look after as well to make sure that the sermons and sermonettes and audio news reports get out on different channels.
You got your hands. Go ahead.
Oh, and thank you very much for the opportunity, Steve. It's a pleasure.
Now let's head back to North America, to the country of Canada on the East Coast, and visit the host of the Canadian Feast of Tabernacles site, Herb and Giselle Haddon.
Hello, Herb and Giselle. It's good to see you folks.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Steve.
How are you?
Good to see you.
I'm fine, thanks. I know you're up there in the eastern part of Canada, and I'm glad you've got the time to join us. I know you've got a construction project going on. Giselle, I'd like to start with you, and I'd like to ask you, what does God have you doing behind the work now?
Well, since I've joined the church, I'm doing the French translation of the booklets and translating it in French. And sometimes it's a little hard to keep up with Dr. Teal because he has a lot of books and booklets coming out that haven't done yet. So I'll get there eventually.
Herb, give us a little bit of what God has you doing behind the work right now.
Well, early on, Steve, Dr. Teal asked if Giselle and I could take care of the accounting for the church here in Canada. So we've been doing that and keeping the books up to date, and also helping make it so that brethren can use receipts from the church for tax purposes. And also, because Giselle is fluent in French, Dr. Teal has asked us to head things up in Haiti. Haiti, as everyone is aware, the French is the second language there. And unfortunately, Moise speaks 3 languages, and one of them is my native tongue, English. So that helps.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to help things move along in Haiti as well.
That's,
Also,
I know. Go ahead.
Dr. Teal has asked us to
head up and prepare the feast sites here in Canada. So we work at that as well.
I'm very grateful for that because I've attended a couple of feast sites in Canada that you've put together. In fact, I'm going to be there again this feast site and looking forward to seeing you and Giselle again for the behind the work video. And I know you've got a lot going on at the house there, so I'll bid you a fond adieu. You didn't know I knew French, did you? That's the limit of it right there.
Now I know I'll have to be careful.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Let's stay in Canada now and jump on over to the West Coast and visit Edith Andrade, who's doing some audiobook for us behind the work.
So what is it that God has you doing now behind the work?
Well, God has me doing a Dr. Tiel's book recording into audiobooks. Dr. Tiel books recording into audiobook.
Okay. So you're doing the audio books for that Dr. Thiel has written books and you're preparing the audio books for them.
Yes, that's right.
I do remember you sending me some of your audio books to listen to. And I think I need to remind you, Edith, that I don't speak Spanish.
I remember that.
But I do appreciate the work that you're doing in these audiobooks because they're very important. People want to listen to audiobooks. Some people even more than reading the books themselves.
Yeah. But God has the power to do it.
Yes, and you know what? You're also doing some interpreting for the book reviews too that other people have written. You're translating those into Spanish also.
Oh, yeah. Well, God knows what we need to do in His church.
Yes, He does. Edith, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Now let's go over to the island of Northern Ireland and visit Jason Curtis.
Hello, Jason.
Hi, Steve.
Good to have you with us from Ireland.
A couple of jobs. The one for the wider CCOG membership and the world preaching the gospel is editing the Bible News Prophecy quarterly magazine, proofreading and correcting, basically putting the full stops in the right place, or as Americans say, periods, I think, don't they?
Uh-huh.
Putting them in the right place and making sure all the brackets are right. It's a fiddly thing to do, but it's important because it makes everything read properly, and then Dr. Thiel is happy with it too, which is the most important thing.
Exactly. That reading is important to be able to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
Indeed. So, but as far as locally goes, I host a Sabbath service on Skype each week for the membership, and we have members in America and in the UK at the moment, in England. And as well as our Sabbath service we have on Skype, we have a Tuesday Bible study. And also we have our own website where we keep the members in touch with each other. And we put out other information on our website. The website's called Bible News. Getting mixed up with Bible News Prophecy. The website is called Bible Truth Live, and the address is bibletruth.live. So you can find us there for extra information on that.
It's bibletruth.live?
Bibletruth.live, yes.
Okay. Jason, what time on Sabbath are your services, and would this be in Northern Ireland time?
Well, we have that's another reason for having our website, because we there's 4 time zones in America and 2 time zones in Europe, and we have the times written on there. So UK time, it's 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. For Sabbath services, and 8 p.m. for Bible studies, which correlates to 12 p.m. For Eastern time in America, and then I think it's 3 p.m. for Bible studies.
Okay.
So it works out well. We cover the 2 time zones. The only time that it's not so good is in the winter when I'm sitting here doing Sabbath services when Sabbath is already finished.
Okay, yeah, because the sundown time changes. Okay.
Yeah, but at the moment, at this time of year, it's I'm still doing Sabbath service on Sabbath, which is nice.
Okay. So how would people be able to log into your Sabbath services?
Well, if you want to come to our Sabbath service, just contact Dr. Teal via CCOG website, and he'll get you invited for us. Welcome new people, and anybody can join us.
Okay, excellent. Is that the same with the Bible study then?
Indeed, yes. Indeed,
Okay.
yeah.
One little question before I let you go, Jason, and I do appreciate your time, is when you find that you're editing the quarterly magazine, do you find that that's error prone, or do you find that it's really a nice job that Dr. Teal does a nice job and there's not that much work to do on it? I'm going to make you tell us tale.
It's yes. Dr. Teal likes everything to be precise, and but justifiably so, because it has to stand up against anybody that wants to argue that we haven't got the truth, and
Right.
we're not teaching the truth. And of course, we know that people do argue that we're not.
Right. Right.
But Dr. Teal likes to make sure everything's just so that nobody can find a fault with anything. And I certainly, in all the years I've been with CCOG, I haven't found a fault with anything yet.
Right.
So yes, I mean, you get the occasional word that's wrong, or very, very occasionally I go back to him and say that this bit doesn't make sense. But it's very, very rare, very rare. But I like to try and.
Now let's go over to Serbia and visit Elder Sasha, who is in charge of the European work for the Continuing Church of God, and see what he's doing behind the work. Church of God.
Well, I've been basically since February of 2016. I've been members of the Continuing Church of God, and the way how I found my way to the Church of God, to the Continuing Church of God in particular, was not really usual way. You know, people usually would find an article of Bob Thiel or some kind of piece of literature out there. In my case, it was somebody who was trying to cause division and was thinking that he was kind of appointed to be the leader of a Philadelphia remnant in Serbia. So he discovered Bob Thiel, and he began lobbying for Bob Thiel and for us to join Bob Thiel. And I was having very bad experience with the hierarchical government, so I was kind of not really very happy to join CCOG immediately. But we began with the article on the 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 with the man of sin, the son of perdition. And when I read that study written by Bob Thiel, I was like, well, this makes sense, and this indeed is something different than what we traditionally taught. Well, traditionally we taught basically what Mr. Armstrong inherited from the Waldensians, that the man of sin would be the Pope, the Roman Pope. But of course, when Dr. Thiel put together all the scriptures, I realized from that article that it will be the first beast, it will be the civil leader, the coming civil leader. So that made a huge impression on me, and I delivered a message in Serbian on the same topic. And then I wrote to Dr. Bob Thiel and I said that, you know, we began studying his literature and so on. Now he remembers that sometimes in the past he asked me something and I gave him a kind response. I don't remember that incident at all, but he does remember it. But anyway, I was I told him that I was in agreement with the doctrine and that I was happy with the doctrines, but that the hierarchical government was putting me off anyway. So he tried to explain to me that it's not the government, that the hierarchical government was not really applied in the right way in the past. And after a while, after fasting and prayer and thinking that I need to maintain, because obviously this person lobbying for Bob Thiel was going to leave the church, and then that would cause division. I thought that the unity of the flock is much more important than me being put off by the hierarchical government. So I decided to give another chance to a hierarchical government and see how it would work. Little did I realize that I myself would a year later become a part of the same hierarchical government. But in any case, it was February 2016 when I basically made that decision, and we all decided. There were several other individuals with us in let's say fellowship, and we just announced without any democratic kind of process. I just announced that we'll be joining CCOG because I was like the host to the whole group, and everybody accepted it. So here we are. We have been here for about now, well, how many has it been? 6 years now. So since February 2016, that's how I joined. And then the next February 2017, there was a Nairobi conference in Kenya when all the African ministry basically was invited, and Bob Thiel flew in from America, and I remember when he told me in his room, he says, "I plan to ordain you an elder." You know, my first thought was, oh no, that's the last thing that I want to be in my life. But then I thought, the second thought was, well, what if God wants that and you are resisting God's will? So I said to Bob Thiel, if that's your choice, okay, if that's your decision, I'll take it, with the prayer that, you know, I would have enough wisdom in my life to be able to provide proper leadership, proper service to God's people. And ever since, I've been doing that.
Well, there are many of us that are grateful that you did make that decision, Sasha. You know, you've touched on some of the things that you've done in the church, but I know that you're also the leader of the church in Eastern Europe, in Serbia. And could you touch on a little bit of some of the other services you provide and the functions that you're required to perform?
Right. Well, basically, when the WCG, the Worldwide Church of God, came to a demise back in 1995, you know, I was kind of young believer, but I joined right away with many of my friends. I joined the first, one of those the biggest probably Church of God out there right now. But sooner rather than later, I realized that they were not really willing to preach the gospel in my native tongue or in Slavic languages. You know, much of the world population is, you know, belongs to Slavic languages, you know, Russian, Ukrainian, Czech, Slovak, the languages of the South Slavic people, the Southeast Europe, and so on. And then, you know, I realized that the leader of that group was obviously not willing to preach the gospel in the Slavic languages, which was quite interesting, even though he is of the Slavic origin himself. But, you know, there are various ironies and absurdities that I've encountered in my spiritual life, one of them being that. And therefore, I began to translate Mr. Armstrong's booklets. I began with the Beast, Who is the Beast, and with the Mark of the Beast, because I thought those two would be very important in Europe, because the Mark of the Beast, as I understood it back then, would be imposed to the rest of the world by the coming European dictator, the first beast. So I began, you know, translating Mr. Armstrong's booklets, and some people got interested in that. So then, very soon, shortly after that, when we realized that that big Church of God organization was not interested, we joined a splinter group of that big organization, because I was believing that their leader would actually help preaching the gospel in the world, including the Slavic-speaking peoples. However, I was terribly wrong. What happened was that the new group began to do away with the basic Bible doctrines, namely the identity of Israel and the seven church eras. So those two vital doctrines, as we know, have been restored by Mr. Armstrong, but the leadership of that group was obviously planning, or the leader himself was planning, to do away with those two basic doctrines, and but it was never announced publicly. So sooner rather than later, I found myself being kind of getting cold shoulders, as you say in your American slang, and sooner rather than later, I was kind of marginalized and dropped. Well, I was kind of pushed out, you know. And then I found myself being by myself, but then I realized that regardless of all the traumas that I've had with hierarchical governments, I realized that my duty was to continue to live by the word of God, but also I realized that I could not really ignore all the things that I know. And one of the things that I knew was that the word, the gospel, had to be preached in all the world. And I live, as I said, I live in Eastern Europe. I live in a certain part of the world which is right now very much in turmoil and very much in need for the gospel truth anyway. So somewhere in December 2012, separately from, interesting, it was December, but it was separate from what was happening with the Continuing Church of God, I realized that I should continue to produce materials in my native tongue and preach for the gospel. Preach the truth of the gospel and various truths anyway in Serbian language. So I In the meantime, I had some money, so I produced about 4 short books on Christ's apostles, on the on the prophecy as well, on the veracity of the scriptures, meaning that the Bible is truly God-inspired and so on. So that was back in 2012. Several people, responded to some of those preachings, and then as a group later in 2016, we joined CCOG. And right now, I've produced recently the first book ever in Serbian on the Passover. You see, we have the Serbian people and Slavic people in general, very Bible illiterate completely. So they've got no clue what is in the Bible, not only because of the Iron Curtain, but because people are generally not really interested to read the Bible. They will read anything else, I guess, watch anything else, but read the Bible and be interested in spiritual topics. Nevertheless, and right now I'm working on a booklet on Constantine the Great, the one who annulled God's law, who replaced the Passover that we have just kept and replaced the feast that we're just keeping with pagan Easter. So it will be done by the June the 3rd, because June the 3rd in the Eastern tradition, that's the day when they celebrate Constantine the Great. Because he is in Eastern tradition, he is regarded as a saint. Not only as a saint, but he is regarded equal to the apostles, which is, it's a blasphemy, one of the greatest blasphemies in the world. So I felt moved to inform my people, or at least those who are interested to know, about the misdeeds and crimes that Constantine the Great committed against the true faith. And he was born in Serbia, by the way, so the reason more to have him being decried from Serbia. Hopefully we'll have that booklet translated into various other languages. We already have some pieces of that booklet in French and Spanish and English and Portuguese, and I hope to have it, translated into many more languages once that booklet is out. But it's amazing how many people, many believers, even true believers, are completely unaware of the role of Constantine the Great in shaping and forming modern nominal Christianity. It's basically, the world is basically following his form of Christianity. The believers that were persecuted by Constantine the Great, of those believers who stuck with the truth and endured to the end, and that should be continual encouragement to us to continue, regardless of what is happening in the world. And one other thing that our believers should know: currently there is a horrible conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There might be conflict with Taiwan, between China and the United States because of Taiwan. But we must always remember that the focal point of God's desire, of God's plan, is not Taiwan, it's not Serbia, it's not Russia, it is the Middle East. You see, once we see the conflict in Middle East, that we are to expect the peacemaker from Europe to come and establish the peace deal of Daniel 9:27, which now we perfectly understand. We never understood it before Dr. Thiel was inspired by God to teach us all that. And then we are to expect the peace deal signed on 7 years, and then in the middle of those 7 years is going to be broken. So then we can expect the Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 to be fulfilled by Jerusalem being surrounded by the armies and the daily sacrifice taken away. So, we are very blessed in this day and age that we have a very clear now, clear plan and clear chronological order of all those events that we did understand before they would happen, but we didn't really put them perfectly together in a perfect chronological order. So through God's mighty power that He has inspired Dr. Thiel, now we can be as certain, and unlike the rest of the world that frets, now it's going to be a world conflict between Russia. No, it will not be a world conflict.
Now let's head over to the eastern side of the United States, to the state of Maryland, and visit Bill Whittekin, who God has something that's very interesting that's being done behind the work.
In this segment, I'd like to take you behind the scenes on our laptop project. Some have referred to this as Laptops for Africa, and that is appropriate because we have supplied many laptops to that region. But we have also sent laptops to other regions, such as Canada, Haiti, Europe, etc. This segment will focus on Africa as that is where it all started. For me, this begins in 2014. My attention was drawn to the Continuing Church of God based on something Dr. Thiel wrote at the Cogwriter website regarding his own departure from another group. He was just coming back from a trip to Kenya, and I read about his attempt to bring just one laptop to our evangelist in Kenya, and some trouble he had with that task. I'm in the computer field, and I knew immediately this could be my something to do. I contacted Dr. Teal, and he put me in touch with our evangelist, Evans Oshiang. I wrote to him that I wanted to try and send him some laptops, and I somewhat naively asked him how many he needed. His reply was about 30. I was thinking 3 or 4 or 5. Where am I going to get 30 laptops? I do get them occasionally, as a customer will offer me their old laptop when they upgrade to a new one. But 30 laptops? So I put a request out to my neighborhood group via Facebook and explained what I was trying to do. Laptops started coming in from neighbors, customers. I did not tell Evans that I didn't think I could get 30 laptops. Rather, I set a personal goal of trying to get just 10 laptops to him. Fixing and upgrading laptops for reuse is the relatively easy part of this project. The big unknown was how to actually get them to Kenya. So I started to do some research. At first I thought we could ship by air. I looked at UPS, FedEx, all the major carriers, but this turned out to be prohibitively expensive. Almost $1,000 per laptop, plus there were all kinds of restrictions and rules regarding shipping batteries on airplanes. I was thinking that this was perhaps not possible, and I bumped into a company in Marietta, Georgia, offering shipping to Kenya based on size, not weight. The name of this company was East African Direct Shipping, and that's where I met Raphael and Stan, who were partners in this venture. I took this photo on my first trip to Georgia. You can see their business listed near the center of the sign. They were located in a strip mall outside of Marietta, Georgia. These men are both native Kenyans, and this was a side business they ran in addition to their regular jobs. They ship items via a shipping container on the open sea, much like the one you see in this photo, and charged by the cubic foot. So we pay for space, not weight, which is much more economical. Plus there are no airplanes involved. This is where I learned the acronym LCL, less than container load. These guys pay a flat fee to ship one or more large containers from the port of Savannah, Georgia to the port of Mombasa, and then onward to the capital of Nairobi. They charge smaller shippers like us for a portion of the space in their container. So I contacted them, and for a modest fee, they could get our box of laptops to Nairobi. The trade-off was that the travel time was several months. The container is on the high seas for 2 to 3 months before it reaches the east coast of Africa. But this was fine as we did not have a deadline. We were almost there but for one glitch. The base fare included sea transportation to the port of Mombasa, customs clearance, and then ground transportation to a warehouse in the capital of Nairobi, where most people come and pick up their shipments. I needed to get these laptops further out to western Kenya, to a town called Kisii. This was over 200 miles from their warehouse in Nairobi. Our recipient, Evans, did not have a good way to travel to Nairobi and pick up a box of laptops and other items weighing perhaps 150 to 200 pounds. Raphael and Stan said they could solve this problem for a few extra dollars. They could provide ground shipping to the final destination. Our box would be put on a bus going to Kisii. So I contracted with them for our first shipment, and it was successful. Perhaps you can see on this early declaration form that we are shipping not just laptops. Also, not everything we send is technology. What started out as a laptop project has morphed into a what else do the brethren over there need that can fit into this box project. On this particular shipment, we included some notebooks, pens, calculators, a camera, and a GPS. After we saw success with the first couple of shipments, Dr. Teal had me include some additional church material, such as Bibles, songbooks, and other items that are more cheaply produced here. Here are some of the extra items we have included with the laptops. One of the extra items asked for is shoes. They do a lot of walking in Kenya. Evans does not own a car or even a motorbike, and he has to hire out any transportation he needs. Here's a small box of CDs containing hymnal music. This was included in an early shipment. Since that time, I have stored the hymnal music directly on each laptop. This is a digital video camera so they can record services or other church events. And here's a couple of digital still cameras that we sent them. As many of you know, Kenya is very much an agrarian society. They grow the food that they need. This is a small sample of some gardening tools they asked for. And here you see about some gloves and knee pads. We sent about a dozen pairs of each. As you can surmise, much of their crops are planted and harvested by hand. The knee pads were especially popular. Various notebooks, pens, calculators. And here's some laptop bags for carrying the laptops. This is a box of speakers. A church member donated these speakers, which can be used to play music from the laptops for services. And an envelope from Dr. Teal going directly to Evans. One year we learned that the African brethren did not even have enough money to buy seeds. And even when they buy local seed, it's mostly hybrid crops that do not yield seed that produces a consistent crop. We shipped them thousands of seeds from an heirloom seed company, non-hybrid crops of various kinds that yield seed for the following season, just as God designed it. Also pictured are growing instructions for each crop. Other items that we have sent, but are not pictured, include cell phones, kitchen utensils, Bibles, and songbooks. All of the non-laptop extras were donated by various brethren. Some laptops are donated by brethren in the U.S. as well, but I obtained most of them from neighbors and customers local to me that are upgrading to something newer. Even so, these donated laptops are not throwaways. Every laptop in the last shipment was running the latest edition of Windows 10. Some even had solid-state drives. Here are some behind-the-scenes photos of the laptops from the time we get them to boxing and shipping. When laptops are donated, I usually just put them in a bin or stack them. They come in every condition, from completely destroyed to brand new. Yes, we do get occasionally a brand new laptop that no one's used. Some will include power cords and some will not. The next step is to triage them. Try to figure out what is wrong with each one and what effort and cost is needed to put into each in order to make them functional. I can fix and replace many parts, including screens, hinges, hard drives, keyboards, but sometimes a laptop is simply not worth repairing. In those cases, I usually salvage any good parts to use as replacements in other laptops. I quickly learned that it was quite expensive to ship the box from my home to the East African Direct Shipping Office in Georgia. For this first shipment, we paid a trucking company to do that. For all future shipments, I drove the box directly to them in Georgia. This presented its own challenges, but it was much less expensive. For example, originally we used larger boxes from the local storage unit to ship the laptops. While we didn't need so much space for the laptops, we could use the extra space to ship additional items. Remember, we're not paying by weight, so the extra space was relatively cheap. We learned after 2 or 3 shipments that these larger boxes were actually hindering our delivery to Evans. It turns out that the larger boxes didn't fit under the standard buses they used to get from Nairobi to Western Kenya. Unfortunately, there was no ready communication back to us to explain that problem. The Kenyans just found another method of ground shipping, but it took much longer. We didn't know why shipments were taking so long to arrive, and no one was sharing that information about the oversized boxes. Once I learned of this problem from Raphael, I switched to smaller boxes, and we haven't had a problem since then. Here's some photos of me trying to transport these large boxes to East African Direct Shipping in Georgia. One of the first trips I used the trunk of my wife's old car. Since I couldn't close the trunk lid, weather was a concern. And here is the box being dropped off in front of one of their containers in Georgia. The trunk of our old Toyota didn't seem ideal, so I tried a tow hitch basket to start carrying these large boxes. I used this method for a few trips until I found out about the trouble putting these large boxes in the belly of a bus in Kenya. Here's a box ready to travel on a tow hitch basket. In this photo, you can see the hitch tray is sagging from the weight. The box was so heavy that the hitch tray was scraping on the ground. I ultimately had to break this shipment down into 2 separate boxes. In subsequent trips, I used boxes small enough to fit in the back seat of my car. Here's a photo of the last shipment we did. The photo was sent to me by Raphael. It shows the tracking number they assigned to our box for delivery. And here's a photo of Raphael and myself on one of my early deliveries. I generally drive overnight to avoid traffic and arrive at his location in the morning. So we went out to breakfast at a local place. And here's a photo of Raphael and I having a cup of coffee in his home upon my most recent delivery. You may be wondering why I'm at his home. Well, after the first 2 shipments, he and Stan dissolved their East African direct shipping business. I found this out when I called for our 3rd shipment in 2015. The phone number was disconnected. Fortunately, I had Raphael's cell phone number and we were connected on Facebook. So I contacted him and asked what was going on. He said that he and Stan had gone their separate ways and that was why the business was closed. So I asked him if he knew of anyone else who could help me with our shipments. He replied, "Oh, don't worry. I will always help you with your shipments to Kenya." And so he has since 2015. He's in the trucking business here in the USA, and he ships to Kenya regularly. Much of his family is in Kenya, and he visits several times a year. So effectively, he is our personal post office to Kenya, and I don't know how we would accomplish what we do without him. In conclusion, God has opened doors and involved a number of people in this project, without which it would not be possible.
Now let's shoot back down to Africa and talk to Ondigo Oching, who's no relation to Evans. And Ondigo is putting together and is the host of a radio program in Africa.
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. Ondigo, how long have you been with the Continuing Church of God?
I've been in the Continuing Church of God for quite a long time, from 2013, from the time of its inception.
Oh, wow, that is quite a while then. Yeah, that's excellent. Tell me, Ondigo, you're in Kenya right now. What does God have you doing behind the work?
I've been doing quite a number of work in Kenya here. For example, I've been doing a radio program that runs for 30 minutes in Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, Mayenga. That's a local radio station. It started picking from 2020 during Corona time, and it's now bearing fruits in Kenya, whereby some people are being called through the radio program. We've been enjoying answering questions, visiting people one-on-one. It has been a very fruitful work.
Ondigo, you say it's a 30-minute radio program. How many times a week do you do that program?
Every Saturday.
Okay, every Saturday,
Every Saturday.
you have a 30-minute program. How do you pick what topics to present on your program?
Well, mostly I pick topics from the CCOG websites and magazines that we do translate, from booklets that Bob Thiel has been publishing. Most of the time, that's where we pick our programs, and even the sermons and sermonettes on the YouTube video.
Okay, and you say you're starting to bear fruit with that work. What type of fruit are you seeing, Ondigo?
That's a very good question. In fact, some people have come, and we have some people who have been brought to hear from us because of the truth, and they have joined us. That's one of the fruits that we have seen. And most of the people are now going to the CCOG website to read more materials from there.
Oh, excellent. Because one of the main themes I have in the video is to proclaim the gospel to all nations, and also to call the full number of Gentiles. And it seems as if your work, your radio program, is bearing fruit in both of those categories. You're broadcasting the gospel of the kingdom and calling in Gentiles.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we've been using avenues that Bob Thiel is using in the Skype, in the YouTube channel, the BitChute, and other channels. We tell people to go there and listen to the video sermons and also the radio channels that are there.
Excellent. Do most of your listening audience speak English? If you send them to Bob Thiel's sermons?
Not exactly. A few people understand English. So those who are understanding English are directed to the website, maybe to listen to the sermons and read materials. But some also benefit from the translated material, the Kiswahili one.
All right, excellent. Andigo, it has been my extreme pleasure to finally meet you. I know we've talked on email many a time, and I'm so glad to meet you, my brother.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you today. I've seen your eyes. May God bless you.
Well, thank you. Same to you. Andigo, thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
Just asking that we may the translated material may be published so that we can give to brothers who are ready or who are yearning to know the truth.
That's a good point you brought up, Andigo. You have sent me some books that have been translated into Swahili, of which I have published 2 of them on a publisher that has made them available on the iPhone and the Android phone, as well as Barnes & Noble, a book distributor here in the United States. So, and you have sent me a 3rd book that has been translated into Swahili. So I thank you for that work too.
You are most welcome. I may say that may God bless you for what you are doing there.
Thank you. Now we're going to take a quick jump back over to the United States of America, to the great state of California, and talk to Dr. Teal and his wife, Joyce. Joyce, I'm going to start with you with a few questions. When did you first come into the Continuing Church of God? I know it was with Dr. Teal, but can you kind of give us a time frame for that?
Yeah, it was like December 2012, and I heard about the Continuing Church of God as a possibility because our former church association was breaking promises and not correcting errors that they told my husband that they would fix.
Okay. Well, do you want to add to that, or do you want me to go on?
Well, I was just gonna say like how I first came into the church.
Okay.
And my brother started to get the Plain Truth magazine, and I was like an older teenager then, and I saw that he was getting it, so I wanted to get it too. And then eventually I called the minister, and I talked to him for quite a while, and then he invited me to church. And so I started to attend church in New Jersey, and then soon after I moved to California on my own, and then I started to attend in Reseda and Pasadena.
Okay. So you've been a long-time member of the church. You just went from the worldwide, basically, let's just say, to Continuing. So what work does God have you doing in Continuing Church of God now, Joyce?
I edit the newsletter that my husband puts on the computer on Wednesday night, and then he sends it out on Thursday morning, and I edit the feast brochure and sometimes edit the Bible News Prophecy magazine, and sometimes, you know, I edit on the computer, and sometimes I edit on paper. And I also take pictures at the feast, at the church activities, and take the group picture. And then sometimes at regular services if we have visitors.
So when you edit the newsletter, that's a weekly job then?
Yes.
Okay, and how often does it take you to edit the magazine?
I don't know. I don't really keep track of the time.
But in other words, is that kind of like a weekly process ongoing? Does that take about a month to put out, or 3 months to put out?
That one I do off and on, but the newsletter I do each week.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's quite a task right there. You have to stay weekly on that. Dr. Teal, I'm going to turn my attention to you now, and basically, rather than asking you specific questions, like how long have you been in the church, I would like, if you would, to kind of give us a view of what you see the Continuing Church of God, where you see us going, what you think might be the next steps for us, and is there anything in the future that we could look forward to other than the return of Jesus Christ, which we are all looking forward to?
Well, what I expect to have happen is that we're going to have some ups and downs. We're going to have some periods of growth. We're going to lose some people at times and come back and forth. I suspect that we may have our own falling away at some particular part. I also think that we'll see others who come with us, some that perhaps people don't expect. We are continuing to prepare for the short work, and this involves putting together more detailed literature, updating websites, putting materials in more languages, or more materials in the languages that we have. And that's something we've been doing, for example, in 2022 with the Mystery of God's Plan booklet. We're unique amongst the churches of God in that we know and teach more details about what God's plan is. And I can suspect in time other people will start to appreciate some of the differences. We're planning on putting out a book that I believe will help us reach people, particularly in Europe, not just in the United Kingdom, but also in the non-English speaking countries. That's something that I see coming down the pike. I'm hopeful that we may have more radio involvement. I've got some ideas about that I don't really want to go into here yet because they're not finalized. But there are some other ways we're going to reach people. You know, we use the internet. On the other hand, one concern that I have is that we're more and more getting censored or canceled, is I guess the way you would call it, the cancel culture. You may recall that YouTube pulled one of your sermons once, a long time back, but they are more and more becoming assertive in pushing certain agendas, and that's affecting us because they're also doing what's called shadow banning, making it so people don't even find our stuff as easily. Similar to that, Google's been doing that with us as well. And I read something recently that DuckDuckGo is going to go more in that direction. So I can see us having some difficulties as we try to reach people over the world. I mean, the internet is great in the sense that many people around the world have cell phones or computer access or internet access. So on one hand, it's an open door. On the other hand, with what we see going on with governments and big tech, we're seeing things that are getting in our way. But that doesn't close the door in places like Africa, which, while they do have cell phones, by the way, most of those people are reached through actual personal contact. So I see us continuing to go through whichever doors are open. Some that we may get frustrated about because they're closed or Satan is pushing, trying to get the door closed, but we know that only Jesus can open them, the ones that we need, and he'll continue to do that.
Well, that's interesting. Now, of course, you've got all our curiosities piqued regarding the radio possibilities upcoming, and you don't want to talk about that, so I'm not going to ask, but I am curious. However, you did also mention the short work, and I know that you are a prolific author. Do you feel that these books that you are producing are going to be a primary focus on completing the short work?
Well, there are steps in the process. When we get a lot of media attention, which I believe we will get at a certain point in time, we want to be prepared. We want to be prepared to deal with atheists, which is why we have the book about is God's existence logical. We want to deal with people who don't believe in the Bible, which is one of the reasons we have a book called Who Gave the World the Bible. But in that particular one, in addition to that function, it also helps counter the position of the Greco-Roman Protestants of how the Bible got here. In my opinion, what most scholars claim is how the Bible got to us isn't really how we got the Bible. It may be how they got the Bible. But doing our research, we found that the Church of God had the chain of custody of the Bible for the entire time. And the reason that's relevant is at the end time, when we see a type of religious revival popping up over in Europe, they're going to say, well, the Bible came from the Greco-Romans, not you guys. So we need to be prepared for that. We also have, for example, our in-depth books on how we differ from the Protestants and how we differ, if you will, from the Greco-Roman Catholic churches. from a couple different perspectives. And we need that because we need to explain to people in the end why we are the original church. See, a lot of churches say they get their doctrine from the Bible, they're the right church, et cetera, et cetera. We can do something that the Protestants are afraid to do, and that is we can quote the people they call early church fathers because they find out, by the way, they were not Trinitarian. They believed in the millennium. Okay? They kept the Sabbath. They didn't eat biblically unclean meats. They kept the biblical holy days. On the other hand, you've got the Greco-Roman Catholics who think they're following teachings of the early fathers. But when you read through their scholastic works, stuff from their scholars, they say, well, yeah, first couple of centuries, yeah, we were this way, but then we switched. But we're really the original church and we never changed. Of course, that's nonsense. So one of the reasons for what we're doing is to prepare not just myself, but members to know this information, because in Daniel chapter 11, it talks about the end times, the people who know their God, we're going to instruct many. And so while we are preparing to get the spotlight of the world to look at our literature, we're also preparing a people to be able to serve in that aspect of the work of God, which is basically what the sermons, when they're about the books, and some of the other messages we have, that's how that all ties in. And I've been asked to write prophetic books. On the other hand, when we did the book Proof Jesus the Messiah, that's a prophetic book, because we have hundreds of scriptures in the Old Testament that Jesus fulfilled and some other prophecies that he did. We put out a pretty in-depth book called Universal Offer of Salvation, where we lay out for the Church of God, the Protestants, and the Greco-Roman Catholics the reality that the Bible teaches that all will be offered an opportunity for salvation, some in this age and most in the age to come. And what's unique about our book, from a Church of God perspective, it's longer than any of the ones I've ever seen. It's got more scriptures than any other ones I've ever seen. But it also deals with the fact of the reality. Some other scholars have said, you know, early Christians seem to believe this kind of stuff, but then they lost it. So we are putting together a database, if you want to use that term, or a knowledge base, and preparing the people to have in-depth knowledge. So when the short work is going on, God will use maybe him or her or you or me or whomever, different phases of this, because we are preparing for that. And we have taken an emphasis on preparing for the final phase of the work beyond any that's ever been done in Church of God history.
You know, you mentioned something there that piqued my curiosity too, along with many things. But one point was that you mentioned prophetic. And I wonder, I've heard the term prophecy and prophetic used to describe someone that accurately portrays a knowledge of the scriptures. Would that be an accurate statement of prophecy or prophetic understanding?
In this particular context, to do with our literature, yes. Now, that being said, we know in Acts chapter 2, verses 17 to 18, God's Spirit is going to cause some of us to prophesy as well. But I will also caution that any prophecies would be consistent with Scripture. Okay, so on that side. But when I talk about prophecy or prophetic literature, it's based upon Scripture, what's happened and what is going to happen. And again, we go in our books and booklets about that. As I mentioned, for example, like the universal offer of salvation. The idea that God is going to call people in the age to come is prophecy. A lot of people, when they think of prophecy, only for the end times, thinking, you're just talking about Great Tribulation or Armageddon. Okay, well, that's part of it. But the bigger plan is God's plan of salvation. The biblical holy days help lay that out, and in certain respects are prophetic. For example, the Feast of Trumpets. We know trumpets are going to be blown. We know Jesus is going to return. The Day of Atonement. We know about Satan being bound. The Feast of Tabernacles. Throughout church history, people said, pictured the millennial reign of Christ. Again, that's also prophecy. So again, our prophetic teachings are based upon Scripture, and our literature supports that. But getting back to things like the Great Tribulation, etc. Book I'm currently working on that probably will not be printed until late 2022 or early 2023, goes into a little bit more about what a lot of people think about prophecy. The king of the north, the king of the south, Armageddon, destruction of the American, British peoples, etc.
You know, I could go on, but I know you two are both swamped and very busy. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much, and look forward to seeing you and reading your books and hearing more from you in the future. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Add anything more?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I research places for the feast, such as Branson and Hershey, Pennsylvania, and last year I researched different places in Tennessee, and we chose Pigeon Forge and Puerto Rico. And I look for things to do, you know, some activities that would be good and that are open at that time of year. And I also set up the audio video for the sermons and sermonettes. I start and stop the camera and try to keep our disabled son quiet.
Well, you know, I know your hands are full, and I knew there was more, so that's why I came back and kind of said, okay, Joyce, maybe I cut you off a little bit. So thank you very much. And besides, I still know that there's still more you didn't share with us, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joyce, and she had some more to say, and I noticed that maybe you had something else to add too. So if you'd like to add something, please go ahead.
One of the things that's unique about the Continuing Church of God is that what it says, not by strength, but by power, but by God's Spirit. And a lot of people think the reason they're going to fulfill whatever they're trying to do with the work is they need a lot more money, and money is what it takes. The Continuing Church of God, we practice servant leadership. We have all these people around the world who are volunteering. My wife, Joyce, doesn't take a salary. I don't take a salary. You don't take a salary from the church. Nobody in the United States or Canada or New Zealand or Australia is taking a salary from the work. And we've got volunteers. And, you know, it's a little different managing a bunch of volunteers, but we've got people volunteering in the UK to have an online service. We've got people doing things with the radio, with the editing. All this stuff's going on around the world, get the gospel out to support the work. And it's mostly a volunteer effort. Yeah, we have expenses and we pay for what we need to. Sometimes you have to pay to be on radio. Of course, you have to pay to print materials and various other types of things. But a lot of what we have actually goes to support travel, to get the gospel out, and to support the poor widows and orphans like we're supposed to be doing as a church. And because we have so many volunteers, we're able to do this. And everybody, whether or not they volunteer to do anything for us or not, can at least pray. And you know the story of the widow's mite, they should be able to at least give some type of offering every now and then to support the work. And then who knows, maybe God will use them to instruct many in the future. So this is a different type of a work going forward on our knees with volunteers around the world. So that's really what's going on behind the work.
Thank you very much, both of you. And if I cut you off again, say something. Before we conclude our interviews for the 2022 Feast of Tabernacles Behind the Words video for the Continuing Church of God, I want to take one more trip back to the great state of Texas for one final interview with Dawn Parr. Dawn, would you please tell us what God has you doing behind the work right now?
Steve, I have the honor of getting to help with prayer requests. There are other brethren who have also helped with that along the way and have organized those when they come in and put them out for the forum so that they can pray for others and pray for the work, I join in the brethren all over the world who are praying for this work behind the scenes. And I'm so thankful for all the prayers that go out to support God's work in these end times.
This about concludes the Feast of Tabernacles Behind the Work video for 2022 for the Continuing Church of God. All the people you just met, all the people that held services, that were hosts, that interpreted books, created audiobooks, held Sabbath services, they all answered yes when God called to complete the work of proclaiming the gospel to all nations and to calling all the Gentiles before the end will come. Unlike these rocks that had no choice but to obey God, every person you saw had the God-given right and the God-given ability to say no. They did not have to say yes. They all said yes. And there are many more that I just didn't have time in this video to show. The last interview we saw was with Dawn Parr, whose contribution behind the works was prayer. Perhaps the most powerful work, the most powerful labor behind the work. As it says in the scriptures, if the prayers of a righteous saint availeth much, and they're praying to the Lord of harvest, for the harvest is ripe, the laborers are few. So we're praying for you, that you would join us behind the work for the Continuing Church of God.